All right. And so, so there were two materials. One is the Tell Me program, and that was the blue book, and then the first storybook, I Went Walking. And then the second one is the core words for classroom and home. So, two separate programs, both really designed to provide a format to teach core words, and both great resources. So, if for some reason you don't have, you didn't receive one of those, just let Libby know. Send Libby an email, and she'll make sure that you do, so that you'll have those. Um, the Tell Me program, we covered a little bit in the first one, so I'm not going to run through everything. But one of the main questions that came out was whether or not it could only be used with preschoolers. And actually, it could be easily adapted for any age group. You might need to use different books if you're dealing with older students, but the format that's laid out could be used with any age group. And as a matter of fact, I know some SLPs in West Virginia who have used it have actually used it with high school age students as well. So this isn't just a program that could be used with preschoolers. The curriculum that's described in the book is designed for preschoolers. It could be used easily for early elementary as well, without many modifications. But if you were dealing with middle school or high school, even upper elementary students, you would probably want to look at the books and decide whether or not they might be too young for your children. They also, but the format that's used, the ideas that are laid out, the materials could be easily adapted. And so I wanted you to keep that in mind, because I know some people were saying, well, this looks good, but I don't have preschoolers. But really, you can think about using it across all the age groups, including your junior high and high school age kids. So let's go back, or let's go on. One of the things the Tell Me program does is it gives you this list of core words. The And so they're listed here. This is straight from the book, so you all have this. And it covers a number of different parts of speech as well. Um, the the core words are divided into the basic words, and then there are advanced words. So if you have students in a classroom, or even if you're using this as part of, say, a group therapy program, and you have students who are at different levels, you do have different vocabulary that you can teach. Now, again, you wouldn't have to teach these core words. You could use this format with your own designed list of core words. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to participate or listen to Gail Van Tatenhove's presentation, that is available. Libby, how would they find that? Sorry, I will catch Libby when she must be tied up back there.
Oh, no, no, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's
I didn't, I forgot I was muted. It should be in the AAC team. I don't think it's there yet, but it will be.
okay. So
Yeah,
there'd be a link there, Libby, where they could get on.
they're probably, I need to work out the logistics, but once we figure that out, it might just be under our videos, because we are able to have a tab for videos and just put them on there.
Okay, so watch for that. And Gail is coming back in January to talk about AAC intervention with school age children. The presentation she gave in August was for, or maybe the end of July actually, was for preschool children. But that presentation talked about even designing your own program to teach core words. And it could be used as part of a curriculum in a classroom. And she's given resources, and I'm going to pull those up here in a little bit so that you have the resources. She's given us resources about how to really create your own core word program. So if you would look at this program and say, well, these aren't the words my students need. There are other words that our team thinks is more important for this student. Well, you could design a program to teach that, and both the Tell Me program and the core vocabulary program give you a format to frame that intervention program so that you don't have to design it on your own. The Tell Me program, of course, is built around 11 books, and the first book, I Went Walking, is included, which you guys have. The thumb drive is sort of, I thought, sort of hidden. It's inside your Tell Me book in the little pocket, and it looks like a credit card, but if you push on the back of it, the little arm pops up, and you can see that in this second picture. The little arm pops up, and then I just put it into my computer, and the materials are there. And I want to show you some of those materials. Let's take a look at the materials. So hopefully, let's see, I'll minimize these other things. So hopefully you're seeing, and Libby, let me know if you aren't, but you should be seeing the folders that say book packet, book printables, PowerPoints. Are you seeing that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So there are book packets for each book. And so if we look, here is the book packet for I Went Walking, which is the book that you have. And if I open that, now you can see the main core words that are taught in I Went Walking are I, you, what, and see. There are additional core words, which are front, read, and tell. And there are toys that they suggest that you get together before you begin your unit. And then there's a particular letter that is focused on both from a recognition standpoint and then also from a writing standpoint. So this, if we move on, we hop down here, and I don't think that I can flip this for you, but all of the various lessons, there are 10 lessons. So you can see lessons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are there on the top, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are at the bottom. This is sort of the lessons at a glance. So each set of core words is taught over 10 days. So it's the idea of 2 weeks of class. And the format is outlined. It says day 1, and this is what you would do, and this is what you would say. And these are some additional activities that you might engage in to allow the individual to learn to use this particular core word. And it's designed, if we, let me hop down here. There are, you can see there's lesson 1, and it tells you, again, it's a lesson at a glance, tells you how you set the stage, and then down here it actually says things like hold up the word symbol cards and say it's time for new words. So if you want something that is really prescribed, this will fit that bill. If you want something to design your own program, but just to give you some idea of the format, this program will do that as well. So it is really flexible from that standpoint. Then I've hopped to the very end because I want you to see that they give you examples of the different symbols sets that they've already given you some symbols. So these are the picture communication symbols, the PCS symbols, or we think of them as the board maker symbols, and they give you multiple copies so that you could run them and print them and cut them out. Then they
Karen,
also, yes.
Ashley says that her
Yes.
book doesn't have a thumb drive, but there's a sticker inside the book with a link and a password for the site to access and download the digital content. So it looks
Ah,
like you have to create an account. So some people may, I guess they've upgraded that or something. And so some of you may have received the one with the thumb drive and some of you may have not. So, but thank you,
okay.
Ashley.
Yes, and I'm glad to know that, Ashley, because I didn't realize that. So that's good. So then you would just, all of these materials, I'm sure, would be available. You just need to go and download those from that web-based site. And they are not, these aren't materials that you don't have permission to copy and print. You do. That's part of the program, is that you have things that you can actually cut out and use without having to go look for those additional materials. The only additional materials that each unit recommends will be listed at the beginning of the unit. If you remember, we saw that little list of toys that they recommended that you gather together. So you have that that list. But otherwise, the rest of the materials are here. And once you either get them from the thumb drive or download them from the cloud, you can print them and use them in any way you need to. So we first saw the picture communication symbols. Then there are also pictures for individuals who are using sign as their primary communication system. And then there are Smarty symbols. So if you're using those symbols, they are included. And and these are they divided the cards into Bow Wow symbols and Tiger Talk symbols. And so there you can see the picture communication symbols for Tiger Talk, Pixon symbols. So that was the next set are Pixons. So we had Smarty, Pixon, Sign, and picture communication symbols. So those are the four symbols that they've prepared for you. But you can use any symbol. So if you're doing, if you're using a Tobii Dynavox device and you're using Snap plus Core, you can use those symbols. If you're using a Prentke Romik device or app, you can use MinSpeak symbols. It doesn't matter. You can use any symbol set that you want. The program is really designed for that. And you could use this with a group of children where multiple children had different symbols. So every child doesn't have to have the same symbol. Now, I will say that that's going to make things a little more complicated, and your prep is going to take a little longer so that you make sure that you have all the symbols for each child. But it certainly is not a problem in terms of the program, as long as it's something that you as the SLP or if you feel like the teachers and whomever is going to be working with you can manage that. You can use multiple symbol sets. So the packet also includes materials that can be sent home to parents. And let me see if I can find that quickly. Let's see, they have follow-up activities and okay. Well, at each unit, I'm not going to waste your time while I dig through here, but each unit has two parent packets. One designed to go home the first week and a second one designed to go home the second week. In it, will be information about the core words that are being taught and the activities that the families might do to assist with the child learning to use those symbols. The program also builds, so the core words that are taught in week 1 are reviewed in week 2, and new words are added to that, so that each week you're reinforcing the previously taught words, which I think is certainly a plus, because we wouldn't want the previously taught words to be forgotten. So that certainly makes sense to me. Are there, well, and we can go back. Let me go back into our folder. That was the first folder, book packets. Then there are just book printables, again, for each book. So we'll go into the printables for I Went Walking. So if you just want the program at a glance, it's there. Then there are material checklists, sorry, for each list. There are lots of different checklists and forms that are included to help you stay organized. Then there are ways to sort of evaluate how you're doing with the program. So if you want to think back, this is working well, and I just want to document all of the things that I've done, you can go through and do this. Or if you have concerns about how things are going, for any reason. But just as another resource, you have these checklists that you can go through for each lesson. And these are for all 10 of these lessons, so that you could print these out and document what you've done. Then they show you these are the appendix materials that are available. So for some lessons there are games, and they give you the materials that you need for those games, and they are all here, so you can print them and you don't have to design them yourself. You can see there are a lot of printables here, and more copies of the symbols that are used for each lesson. Then if we look, then in some cases, you may want to have your books available on PowerPoint so that they could be projected for the whole class. So they give you the template to design those, if that's what you want. They give you an example of the I Went Walking book, and then you can use that as a template for each of the other books. And then, the share packets, I believe those are, let's look. Okay, so this is a packet to go home. So this is where it is. It wasn't in the other folder. So this is a packet that can go home. It can explain, in this case, of course, we're starting with book 1, so it explains exactly what this program is, why is core language so important, how do children learn it, what should I expect in the share packets, so that they get an idea of what is going to be in each packet that they receive, what is going to be taught, the words are all listed there, and then activities that can be done with the child at home. So that's the share packets for families. And they've given you some templates that you can use if you want to print out some of your own. And then they also have a little separate folder with all the word and symbol cards. And we already looked at those, but they appear here as well. So all of the materials that you would need, if these were the books that you were going to use, are available. Any questions about the Tell Me program? Pull our PowerPoint back up. Libby, do we see anybody having any questions?
I do not. Nope.
Okay, all right. So let's go on then and let's look at the core vocabulary program. So this is a book that was published in 2018, so not too terribly long ago. Um, it teaches 24 core words, so not quite as many core words as the Tell Me program. Um, and these are the core words that it focuses on. And again, it has a format. It's designed for 2 weeks as well. There's a 2-week outline of activities. And so this is just an example. This is a page from the book where it tells you in week 1 on Monday what you would do, and then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on. It tells you what you're going to do, how you're going to present your vocabulary, and so on. But the nice thing about this outline, there's a general outline which you're seeing, which you see here, that you could easily adapt for any core words you wanted to teach. So if you wanted to teach something other than the core words that were included in the program, you certainly could. If you are using those 24 core words, then you get very specific information about how to teach those. There's a guide for each of the 24 words, and it includes example phrases that you might be using to teach that core word, books that can be used, writing activities, games, art activities, cooking, and then it also gives you possible symbols that you can use to relay those vocabulary items. You can do it with any symbol set, but the examples they use are the LAMP's Words for Life, MnSpeak symbols, and the Prolo Quota Go symbols and sign. So those are the symbols that are included, but they're very clear that you could use any. Those are just the resources that they've included in the book. I wondered if, and I'd already asked you about using that core words. So the program is similar in that it gives you a format for teaching those words. It introduces, and in this case, one new word every week. I mean, every 2 weeks. So with the idea that you would cover all of those 24 words within a school year. When Gail Van Tatenhove was talking about setting up a program like this, she suggested that a team could get together and pick the core words that they wanted to teach and could lay those core words out over the course of the academic year. So it could start at the beginning of the year, and you could decide week 1, for weeks 1 and 2, what words were you going to teach, and then what were you going to add during weeks 3 and 4, and so on and so forth. And you could use either or both of these as a guide for how those would be taught and resources that you could use. You could pull on the Tell Me program, you can pull those documents off, like the sharing document, and use that as sort of a template to design a sharing document to be sent home regardless of what core words you were going to be introducing. Gail talked about a variety of different strategies in her presentation, and of course she talked all day, so we don't have a whole lot of time. But there were a couple of things that I thought bared repeating. She really talked about the idea that you could use low tech as a bridge to a device or an app. And she talked about using low tech as you're trying to decide. I don't know if you all find this, but I know in many of the kids that I worked with in AAC, I didn't have all the answers very quickly. Many of the children are very complex. and often it took time for me to work out. It might be an access issue because the child perhaps had significant motor issues, or there might have been sensory issues, vision or hearing, um, or there might have been multiple reasons why it was difficult to determine exactly what high-tech system was going to be best. Um, there isn't there. I'm not suggesting that you have to start with low tech, because on the other side of that, there were children that I saw where it was very clear to me what direction was going to be best for them, and we could make the decision fairly quickly about what device or app to start that child on. But in some cases, it is difficult to know. In other times, I've found that it wasn't always feasible to be using the high-tech device for every activity. And particularly if a teacher was teaching a classroom and had children on different kinds of systems, sometimes it didn't make sense to be using their high-tech device for every activity. And so it might be better for a particular activity to use some low-tech. So it might be that you have a child who's in, let's say, LAMP Words for Life, or a couple of children in a classroom who are using LAMP Words for Life. So you may have the symbols printed and actually have paper copies of those symbols that the teacher might be able to use a little more easily than actually modeling on the device. And so as they're teaching a lesson, they might be, or reading a book, they might be able to hold up those symbols and present those symbols to the child, so they would have an opportunity to engage with the symbols in a low-tech form as well as in the high-tech form. There are a variety of reasons why you might need low tech. You might need it just to build their language skills. So you may still be trying to decide what high tech system. Sometimes we're using low tech system just to, she calls it, boost access to core vocabulary. So to really reinforce the use of that core vocabulary, it might be a benefit to have a low-tech board or individual cutout symbols that can be presented throughout the day, even though they have a light or a high-tech system as their primary system. Or we can use it as a bridge to a device or an app to transition from low-tech to high-tech. I know for some of the children who I've worked with who've needed an eye gaze system, I have often used symbols on an E-Tran, plexiglass, clear plexiglass E-Tran. I've often used that in addition to the high-tech device because at certain times it was just simply easier to have that available, perhaps in classroom during a particular activity. And if possible, you're using the same symbols that you're using on the device, but you may be able to enhance their knowledge of their vocabulary by using the low-tech system in addition to the high-tech. So it might be used as a bridge to a high-tech system, or as a backup, because as we all know, technology doesn't always work. So I thought that was important. You know, we think about systems as being multimodal, but having either a notebook that you've created, maybe with paper layouts of the vocabulary that you're using in your app or in your high-tech device, might be used as a backup, or individual boards or just individual symbols. But having that backup can be a benefit. So I thought that was an important strategy that she addresses in her presentation. She also talked about building capacity through supporting the family. And I know when we talked last month, one of the concerns that folks had about really being able to have success with AAC was the issues with the family buy-in. And Gail addressed that in her presentation as well. And these were some of the strategies that she really suggested. She talked about the idea of listen, 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 listen in the very beginning with families. And she recognized, as do I, that it isn't easy for you to have access to families when you're working in the schools. But often family members will accept an AAC system if they feel that their input is welcomed and honored. So Gail, I think, has a point that if we can take the time in the beginning to really listen to family concerns, what families are looking for from a communication system, address their concerns or the myths that they may believe, and I'll give you some materials for that as well, that can be time very well spent. One of the other things that she emphasized was helping the family have positive social interactions and play with their child. Now, she does a lot of home-based visits. And what she would find was that families sometimes struggled, particularly with their, well, really it would be all age groups because she worked with all ages. She would find that families took very good care of their children, but that sometimes they really struggled to have play opportunities or to just have plain old social interactions with their children because of the multiple concerns and all of the health issues and all of the kinds of things that families have to deal with these kids with complex communication needs. And so she would focus early on in some way to create opportunities for some positive social interactions and play, and that helped some of her families see a way to that AAC might benefit them in ways they hadn't thought about before. Because now their child, they could interact a little more easily and have a little more fun with their child because of the suggestions she gave and the ways they were able to use their AAC symbols for social interaction and play. And then she also talked about helping them learn how to collect information and then access services that are important to them. So it sort of falls back to that listen, listen, listen idea. If a family had particular needs, she would try to find ways to connect them with services that they might benefit from. And then also the idea that it's important to recognize the particular difficulties for families and siblings of children with complex communication needs and encourage them to maintain their own emotional and physical well-being. Because we certainly know if they aren't healthy, then they're not going to be able to provide a good motivating environment for their child. Another thing she talked about was helping them connect with other families. And I know through my work in AAC that I have found that I will have families who will say to me, let me know if you have other parents who want to talk. I'd love to engage with them. And I always took them very seriously and kept their contact information. And then as I had new families who I felt might benefit from a more experienced family's input, I would try to connect them together. And I've had families come back to me and say how valuable that was, what a good experience that was. Of course, this is something where you'd have to have everybody's okay. As I say, I only connected people with families who really had reached out to me and said that they wanted to do that. And then, of course, the new family, I might present to them that this is an opportunity, and if they wanted to contact this family, they could, and I would give them the contact information, and then I would let the experienced family know that a new family might be contacting them without giving them any of the HIPAA protected information. I wouldn't give anybody names. I would let the families exchange that themselves. And not all families followed through, certainly, but some did, and certainly expressed to me how valuable that was. And then finally, at the end, instructing the family on strategies and the technology that their child uses. And I know for a long time that was where I started, was with that last piece. And I discovered that there were some families who would sort of dig their heels in, and they would say to me, but I don't understand why we're doing this, or I don't think this is the right thing for my child, or I have concerns that this is going to cause my child not to develop speech, or whatever it was. If instead I could flip it and I could develop a relationship with the family first, then when we got to really dealing with the AAC strategies and technology, it seemed to be better received. Again, I know that isn't always easy, and it's certainly a challenge for you all in the schools. Gail also gave us classroom strategies in addition to the at-home strategies. And this is where she really talked about the team identifying critical core vocabulary. And really emphasized that this was something that the team would determine, and not just one professional or any one member of the team. So it wouldn't necessarily always come to the SLP to decide that, or always fall to the family, or always fall to the educator or to the aide. It really was a group decision where the group would decide that they on what core vocabulary they really wanted to focus on. But that really being the first step for the classroom, that it was necessary to really identify that core vocabulary, and then to determine the visual support materials that were going to be used to teach the core vocabulary. So this is the point where you might say, I've got the Tell Me program, I've got the core vocabulary program. Does anybody have any other core vocabulary program they like? I know there's one that Carol Zangari talks about in Practical AAC. There are a couple of different webinars on a word a week, and they lay out the format for teaching a set of core vocabulary across the school year. Libby, did anybody mention any other resources that they're using to teach core vocabulary?
Yes, Karen Bradley mentioned School Year of Core on AAC Language Lab.
Excellent. Great. Another good resource. Yes. Anything else?
Don't see anything else.
Okay. But my idea here is for you all to just have a lot of different resources, and then you can pick what you like the best. because we're all different in terms of what we're looking for in programs. So you would decide on your support material for the core you've picked on, and then decide on those teaching strategies or that format. And as I say, that you've got some great examples in the Tell Me program and in the core vocabulary program. And then you use that core across all the activities in the classroom and across the school day, so that the child, it's not just falling to the SLP to teach that core when they have the child. The core is going to be really taught across the day by everyone who's working with them. And then we all know that there are some individuals who are simply better communication partners, right? That understand how to provide multiple opportunities for a child to communicate, and also can encourage that communication across a variety of partners. But then there are other communication partners who struggle when communication isn't spoken words. They really struggle to figure out how to provide those opportunities throughout the day. So it may be necessary to provide communication partner strategy instruction. There are also a lot of resources in that, and that is something that I hope in the future we'll have an opportunity to talk about in more depth, because there's been a lot of research in the last really probably 20 years that has looked at the difference that we can make when we provide training to the communication partners and teach them how to provide opportunities, encourage communication, create opportunities, and really throughout the day, throughout various environments. The having really strong communication partners, the research tells us, will result in better communicators. And so we've got a nice body of literature to support that. So we definitely want to keep that in mind, that we may need to train communication partners. And then, of course, we have that opportunity of using those prepared materials. Okay. All right. A couple of things that Gail Van Tatenhove said that resonated with me was, she talked about that it could take years to create the best possible system. And she actually gives an example of a child she worked with, and it took her 3.5 years to decide what was going to be the best system for that child. And that's, I think, something that we all have to keep in mind. I think, and something I think we have to share with other team members, because we don't always have the answers real quickly. And I think it's really important to know that that's okay. But there are a lot of skills that can be worked on that can help create that foundation for a successful AAC system. And that was one of the reasons why Gail Van Tatenhove spent so much time talking about all of the low-tech kinds of things that could be done that can lay the groundwork. So it's not that you aren't working on AAC, you certainly are, but you may not be doing it within your ultimate system. So you might be using low-tech boards or individual pictures, or various low-tech materials, depending on the child's level. The child she used as an example was actually a preschooler, and she started with it, I believe, 18 months. And she had to start with tangible symbols. And of course, that didn't provide an opportunity for her to use a high-tech piece of equipment at the very beginning. And then she had to transfer that child to abstract symbols, and that happened eventually. And once she could get that child to abstract symbols, she had a lot of access issues that had to be worked out. And ultimately, the child ended up using abstract symbols on an eye gaze system, but that wasn't a possibility when that child was 18 months. But she was able to use low-tech materials to provide that child with a communication system until she got to a point where she could actually create a high-tech system for him. And so I think it's important for us to think about that. She has given us a variety of resources. Oh, this is another thought, a Gail Van Tatenhove thought before I go to the resources. Bruce Baker, who was the person who designed and created MinSpeak, talks about the Baker equation. He said, if the motivation to communicate a message is greater than the physical effort, cognitive effort, and time required to produce it, then communication will occur. If not, no message will be generated. So the motivation has to be greater than the physical effort, cognitive effort, and time. And when we think about the struggle some of our children go through to relay a message, we certainly can begin to understand why they might not use an AAC system. So it's just something to keep in mind. Gail presented it, and I thought it was something important for us to talk about. She provided for everyone who attended this session a treasure trove of resource materials. So before we got started today, Libby and I talked about these. Once she makes available the link to you all, we will make sure that these resources are posted for anyone who watches her presentation. I want to pull those up, so just bear with me for a minute as I pull up her folder. She has research articles which include the articles that debunk a lot of the prerequisites, that talk about the myths, and then a great article that talks about where we are after 30 years of AAC. So there are some articles in her folder. Whoops, I did not mean to do that. Sorry about that. Let me pull her back up again. I have a tendency to X out of things that I shouldn't. Okay, we're back again. Okay, but another thing that I think is really good is she has the myths. And these are actually materials that came from Toby Donavox that she had permission to use. So for each particular myth, there's a handout. So if someone says introducing and using AAC will keep an individual from using and developing his or her natural speech, right? So then it goes through and it talks about this is false and why. It includes not just opinion, but articles and summarizes those articles. So this is absolutely something that you could hand out to perhaps a team member who is doubtful that and feels that AAC may negatively impact speech, or you could send it home to families. And that's just one example. That a child is too young for AAC. And again, lots of information about the fact that we want to start as young as possible. The child is too impaired for AAC. Again, false and information. So I think these are great resources, and there are 7 of those. All right. So then she talks about setting up your own AAC system. she gives you a way to design a manual communication board and lays out all of the kind of things that you need to be thinking about, um, and gives you lots of good information. So if you're thinking about designing a manual communication board for one of your children, you have a guide in here. And then she gives you lots of core word lists and expanded vocabulary lists. And then the last folder are intervention forms. So there are checklists. So one of the things we know in AAC and that she talked about was the fact that we have a tendency to focus on needs and wants. And we need to think about lots of different kinds of communication functions. So she's given you a checklist to look at various ways an individual might be relaying a communication function. And she's got those laid out here. You can see agree, disagree, greet, part, call someone, protest, cease something, request assistance, all of these different communication functions or communication intents. And she's given it to you as a Word document and then also as a PDF. And then also we have teaching core vocabulary with activity-based instruction, and again as a Word and a PDF. And then another nice handout that came out of Saltillo, choosing activity first, because sometimes, like for example, I'm sure many of your schools are celebrating Halloween. So if you are, you have an activity that you want to do, this tells you ways that you can incorporate core vocabulary or how to design that activity to teach core vocabulary. I know we're about done in terms of our time. Any thoughts? As I say, this will all become available in that folder that Libby and I are going to put together with Gail's presentation. Any comments or anything we need to talk about, Libby, that came up in the chat?
I haven't seen anything, but we have a small enough group that if people would want to unmic themselves, they could do that.
Certainly.
And I have posted the verification of attendance in the chat.
Great.
So if you would fill that out. And what I'm going to do is stop the recording, but does anybody have any questions?
And while people are having a chance to type,